very rigorous, very in-depth, requires a lot of time to deliver the instruction. The curriculum is written for 180 days. They have 172. Not to mention field trips and all the other things that come into our schedules. So they have to take this high-quality research-aligned curriculum, and they have to make some edits to it. And so that's something to consider around time. That is compounded by attendance. 33% of children in Oregon are chronically absent. That means they miss 10% or more days of school in a current year. So you compound that by the already short school year, that's less access. I'll give an example of an impact. There's myriad impacts of this, but I'll give an example. I was just in a classroom in Portland this week, terrific second grade reading lesson on foundational skills. The children were doing some dictation and they were self-checking their work, terrific practice. As a science, it is complex. And we want our university students to be prepared when they graduate. As part of the Early Literacy Success Act, which I'll talk about in a moment, one of the provisions is that our educator preparation programs do need to revise and align their programs and their curricula to the science of reading, which is really terrific. The state convened a panel of educators, including Rhonda Fritz, the educator who leads the program at Eastern Oregon, that institution that got an A, with their guidance. The guidance came out in June of 2024, and our institutions of higher ed have until this fall of 2026, to revise and refine their programming. A recent report in the Oregonian from Julia Silverman that came out in December sort of identified the current state of where our institutions are in these refinements. And one of the institutions that did not get a high grade said that their current syllabus meets nearly all the criteria. So there is this expectation that we are improving those opportunities, and yet we're kind of slow to make those changes. Again, that's sort of why we are where we are. We think about, again, there's some national components to this around the pendulum swing, around literacy instruction, but then there are these three factors in our state that really compound that, right? So the strong local control and decentralization, time and attendance, and our educator preparation programs. So I'm gonna pause for just a moment and ask you to think about something that I just shared that surprised you, or challenged your thinking, or affirms your thinking. So just think for just a moment. I'm gonna ask you to turn and talk to someone next to you for just like 30 seconds each, just to pause and reflect on what you heard. And then when I put my hand up, we'll come back together. I'm not tracking the time. I have my phone out, but I don't even know what time I started. Do you know what time I started?
If needed on time.
Yeah, so we're doing fine. So.
Okay.
What was your ranking, Kyle? What?
Am I talking too fast?
I think these are all things that are about this. These are about budget cuts that would answer. Okay. I think those are tech questions. I almost feel like this one is better phrased than this one. Okay. Yeah. And then I like these. I also just want to see what we talked about.
Terrific, thanks for indulging me. Hope there was an opportunity for you to synthesize some of what you've heard. Because now I'm going to talk about what we're doing about it. which is really exciting, and I get to lean into this work every day in supporting schools. So Oregon passed the Early Literacy Success Act in 2023. Stand for Children, the organization for which I work, championed that legislation, and there was strong support. This is really exciting for our state in so many ways. Most importantly, we are putting a stake in the ground about what we believe and what we know the research says around high quality instructional experiences for our children across the state. Even more exciting, there is funding for it. So our legislature is championing funding for this, and our governor is behind this initiative. So it's really clear that this is a strong investment from our state, which is a very important, profound moment. That's an example of brave leadership. There are 4 key components of this legislation that are directed from the State Department, our State Department of Education, particularly investing in high quality instructional materials, investing in professional development and instructional coaching for educators, high dosage tutoring for children, and summer programming for children. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about each of those and share a little bit about some findings related to those. In terms of high quality curriculum and materials, we commonly call them HQIM within the education ecosystem. It's making sure that the materials are standards aligned, making sure the materials are aligned to the research, and also making sure the materials are educative, meaning as the teacher is teaching the curriculum, they're growing their practice. Because as I mentioned, teaching reading is a craft, it's an art, it's a science, it's a very complex thing. I'm really pleased to share that ODE just presented their second annual report to the legislature about the Early Literacy Success Act, and 170 school districts, or 89% have adopted state-approved curriculum, which is really exciting. So our state is saying these are the approved curricula you can choose from, and our districts are listening and taking that guidance. And that's a 9% increase from just a year ago. So that's very exciting. I will say that in this report, they also shared that only 36% of districts say educators must use the materials with a high degree of integrity or fidelity. And so thinking about the leadership within the district, from the instructional coach to the principal to the superintendent, saying that we have invested in these materials, that now we're gonna really use them with integrity so that children from this second grade classroom in this school to that second grade classroom in that school are getting access to the same high quality learning, right? These practices are intended to make sure it's not like, oh, you got that good first grade teacher. We want all of our children to have that good first grade teacher. And we know that's possible because other states are doing it. So it really is about equitable access, and it's really about the district supporting the implementation. And so really allowing teachers to spend their time understanding the curriculum that they're teaching, and then really thinking about how they're gonna motivate and connect and differentiate the instruction so every child in their classroom can really achieve and thrive on high levels. The second allowable expenditure and big investment is professional development and instructional coaching. And so there are a lot of resources to support this, which is very exciting. Instructional coaching is a powerful research-informed practice to really change instruction when done in alignment with the research. So just because someone is a brilliant second grade teacher doesn't mean they have the skill set or the interest in coaching adults. That's pretty different. Right? Spending your day with children is different from spending your day with adults. So really making sure that your instructional coaches have the right dispositions, and then also training and skills to support instructional coaching. And most importantly, time to do the work of coaching. I was a principal for 15 years, both in Portland and in Washington, D.C. And it's very easy for an instructional coach to become your deputy principal, or the person who steps in for discipline, or the person who does the extra lunch duty. But if the theory is that investing in teachers and the craft and their practice is high leverage, and we know it is, then they need to spend their time in classrooms coaching teachers, in classrooms modeling lessons for teachers, in classrooms planning with teachers. So instructional coaching is really exciting and powerful when done well. Same thing around professional development. All the research says that professional development that is ongoing, that is connected to the curriculum and is nested in other forms of learning is most effective. And so really thinking about how the professional learning that teachers are getting supports their growth, and how they're applying it is fundamental. I'll give one example about instructional coaching. In Mississippi, which is a state we're hearing a lot about recently, they had state-level instructional coaches. They were so rigorous in making sure they were quality that they had vacant positions because they wanted to make sure they had the right people in the roles. That's brave leadership, right? It's a hard thing to say, I've got money for this position, but I'm gonna pause on hiring someone until I get the people who are the right people to do that work. We've got two more pieces of the legislation. The next one is high dosage tutoring, which is a research-informed approach that really emerged post-pandemic. So the vocabulary, the terminology didn't even exist until 2021. And there is funding, there's additional funding that just came out. Salem Keizer got some of that additional funding to support this model. It's characterized by frequency, duration, and a few other characteristics. So it's 3 times a week, 30 minutes, no more than 4 kids in a group with a highly trained tutor over a course of 8 to 10 weeks. So it's different from when I was a teacher in Baltimore and I said, who wants to stay after school and do some math? It's far more precise and really research informed. Portland Public Schools, I got to start this work before I left the district, and they've made it even better since I left. Last year, they offered high dosage tutoring to kinder, first, second, and third graders. Their third graders had an average of 29 tutoring sessions over the course of the year, and on their assessments, 42% of those children showed significant growth from the beginning of the tutoring to the end of the tutoring. So when done well, we know it works. The last piece is summer programming, and we're really excited that our legislature just last year passed 3 years of summer funding, so districts can plan further in advance. It's really important that summer learning is research informed, a minimum of 60 hours of reading instruction, applying all of those great practices of reading. And I'll give an example from just a little bit south of here, Bethel School District, which is near Eugene. Last summer they offered a 7-week summer programming. I got to visit, it was really terrific. And of the children who participated, they prioritized the kids who needed the most support. Of the 25% of the participating students no longer needed intensive reading intervention after that 7 weeks. And they are continuing to track the progress of those students and are seeing the fruits of that continue to endure as those children continue on in school. So there's a lot of optimism despite some of the challenges we currently face. And just to bring it back to brave Irene, it really takes brave leadership, because our state has invested in these key components, and those are some technical pieces, but it's really about strong leaders, from superintendents to principals to classroom teachers, who I perceive very much to be leaders, making those research-informed decisions, really centering these best practices that we can really make some shifts for our children. Thank you.
Next up, we're going to hear from Andrea Castaneda, who is the superintendent of the Salem Keizer School District. She's been an educator for over 20 years. And as I looked at her biography, a couple of her job titles caught my attention that seem really relevant to what we're talking about tonight. One of her positions was Chief of Accelerating School Performance when she worked for the state of Rhode Island. At the Tulsa School District, one of her titles was Chief Innovation Officer. And boy, if we need innovation, it's on this topic. So the fun fact about our superintendent I want to share is that her first job was teaching a bunch of small, freezing children how to swim. Andrea, all yours.
That's true. And the boys, they would huddle next to the heater and just their teeth would chatter until it was finally time to get out. So good evening, everyone. I am so happy to be here with you tonight. Kind of run through some of my previous roles, and the pause on Chief Innovation Officer is actually a topic I'll briefly come back to later when we talk a little more about what we're doing next. So one of the ways in our background conversations on email, one of the things that Les asked of us is that we show up with as much plain language and honesty as possible. Like, let's just kind of breathe the truth as much as we are able to bring it into the room. And so I'm going to really do my best to live up to that. But I also just want to say, for who in the audience right now is a teacher in Salem Keizer? Okay, so you all, although there are lights and I can't see you all, and I'm glad everyone is here, you all are the people who I have most in mind right now. And I'm grateful for the chance to have what might be the most intimate and honest conversation that I have been able to have with any of you about this topic. And to do it, there's something a footnote that I need to offer first. There is nothing about this topic that makes me uncomfortable except for one thing, which is that I want to be really clear that in answering the question, how do we get here, I am not offering criticism. And in fact, what I think is that, we've got staff who have been working very hard. We have leaders who have been in our system and ones that have exited, and we all, no matter our role, We do the best we can in the moment that we're leading with what we know. And the moment that we know better, we do better. And I think that's the spirit that connects me to past and future superintendents. It's also just the spirit of the moment as we're talking about the pivots that Dana is calling on us to make as a state and as a system. So to talk about how we got here, I think it is important to just quickly name the factors that did not get us here. You already kicked it off. We are not here because of our students or their families. We're not here because of their backgrounds. We're not here because our staff are not working hard. We're not here because our staff are not skilled. And we are not here because our system isn't trying or doesn't care. None of those things are true. I think that Oregon in general, but Salem-Keizer in particular, is here for a much more technical but systematic reason, which is that our approach to teaching reading has not adequately supported teachers in the task we asked of them, and it has drifted from evidence-based practices that we know work. Going back to my brief stint as a Chief Innovation Officer, we're not going to innovate around reading. There are places to innovate, and there are places to run a playbook. We are running a playbook on reading because we know how to do it, and we know what happens when we don't do it right. So I think that there are three major system gaps that I've been able to learn about in the 3 years that I've been here. So the first one is, and just every time I say this, I'm going to say I believe, because I don't know as much about the history or the work as many people on stage and in the audience. The first is that I think we are a district that has inconsistently and unevenly implemented curriculum. And I say that with both precision and respect, but it is a K-12 issue in our district. And if we look back just even a couple of years, it would be true that we have whole content areas where there was no adopted core content curriculum. And that leaves teachers doing a lot of work to build something for themselves that is worthy of their students. Moving forward, we're still in this transitional phase where we have curriculum, and some days it's used and some days it's not. Some classrooms it's not used at all, some classrooms it's used all the time. We have a culture shift that we're making as a district, and you don't make it overnight, but you do make it with clearly signaled expectations. And that is about the fact that curriculum, and it is never more important than elementary reading curriculum, is one of the essential building blocks of successful readers and their progress. I think a second gap in our system is that we have not provided our staff with all of the support they need to do the work that we are asking them to do. And in Salem-Keizer, and I believe it is true for us even more than some of our neighboring peer districts, teachers are doing everything all day. I have been in over 100 elementary classrooms this year. I've seen you doing everything all day long. And the support, which is time, it's access to the right tools, it's data, it's coaching, all of those things are part of a system of success. And when we don't have those pieces in place, we are letting the most important part of the work, which is teachers and their practice, sink while we're asking everything else to progress. And then finally, I think that it is important to notice that we are asking for an awful lot of acceleration for students, but we haven't actually been able to close that grade level gap for kids who are far behind. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I mean, part of it is that we haven't had the assessment tools in place that give parents, kids, and educators the actionable information you need to actually know with precision where kids are. And this is especially important in those early years where foundational skills are not something that can be guessed at. They need to be learned to mastery, or kids will not be able to progress to the next stages of reading. Brave Irene is not accessible to kids who can't decode. So, as we talk about acceleration, we have to notice that we have kids who, they enter maybe a grade level behind. And if they make one grade level's growth that year, it means they're still carrying that 1 year gap with them. And every time they carry it forward and their peers are spiraling up and progressing into comprehension and fluency, and they are stuck, it's just a little bit harder for them to feel like successful learners. But for them to make up more than a year, our teachers need a lot of things that we haven't given them yet. They need the ability to identify the skills, the discrete skills that need support. They need great intervention materials that are curriculum aligned. They need instructional assistants in their classrooms who are their partners in delivering interventions. And those are all things that in Salem-Keizer we haven't done yet. And then I think there's just one more thing that is a little bit specific to us, perhaps, but I do feel like I need to mention it. When I first came, the number one thing that we were talking about as a system was behavior. And it is absolutely the case that student behavior can sweep up an entire day. In some cases, it can sweep up an entire classroom, and occasionally it can it's a whirlwind that can sweep up an entire school intermittently for an entire year. And we did not, and still do not entirely, we did not have systems in place. It was a major phenomenon, and it is part of Salem-Keizer's reading story. So, having gone through kind of a quick inventory of the answer to the question, how did we get here? I'm going to just kind of reverse that script and talk about what we're doing now. So, first of all, next year, as everyone who raised their hands knows, next year we are going to be implementing core curriculum for elementary reading. And it is both important and also going to be true that we are clear about expectations for its use and providing teachers the support so that they will feel ready. The curriculum that our schools are piloting right now, and there's probably people in the room piloting them, they are evidence-based, they are good options for our system, and learning how to teach those requires a ton of internalization and just getting familiar and knowing what you're going to do. And those first years, the first years of a new curriculum are especially demanding. And so we need to know that we're providing both the support along with the expectation of its use. You know, it's been a funny week because this week I'm on stage with you all speaking about reading, but earlier in this week we were also holding meetings about a $23 million budget cut. And one of the things that's true is that we are investing in elementary reading at the same time that we are making reductions other places. So this curriculum adoption, yes, it's expensive. It'll be between $11 and $12 million for Salem-Keizer to get great curriculum into every elementary classroom. And we're going to do it even though we are reducing in other areas because we cannot afford to wait on this, not any longer. We're also in elementary, even though we're reducing in other areas, we're reducing our elementary blended classes by 50%. That is a system priority that says that the K-1 years have got to be prioritized and they've got to be sheltered so that those foundational skills can be taught to a level that is secure. So kids are ready to move forward. And we can't expect our K-1 teachers or our elementary teachers at all to be magicians. We have to give them the conditions that allow them to be successful. A second thing that we're doing, and we have actually already started this year in preparation for next year, is increasing the amount of time for professional learning, improving the tools available for teachers' use, and adding additional coaching services. And, you know, there is actually, the only time better than the present is the past to have done all of those things, but doing it before our implementation of our new curriculum is helping us get a head start on this. And this is professional development, but as you guys all know, it is also PLCs. It's planning with your grade level teams. It's having time to be able to work through the content shifts and the instructional shifts that are coming at all of us. So last week, as I think almost everyone knows, we hosted 3 days. 1,700 elementary educators did 3 days of science of reading training. And I mean, I did it over the summer. It is intensive. You leave tired, but you leave with your heart sort of full of the promise of what can be possible when our practice is just improved. And we had amazing feedback from that from our staff. But I also want you all, our team, to know that as that was happening and the media was rolling out, I and our leadership team, we were getting calls from all over the country, literally saying, wait, what did you do? That's the signal you sent? How seriously are you taking this? Because canceling school is a big deal. But using every instructional day that we have really well to secure great outcomes for kids in the earliest years, that's a big deal too. And then finally, I also just want to say that our teachers need access to useful data. So only 2 years ago, we didn't have strong screening and progress monitoring tools for elementary reading, and we are on our way now. So we're in our second full year of using a system-wide tool for progress monitoring. Those of you who raised your hand, you know that I'm talking about STAR. And getting the ability to be able to compare classes within a building, buildings across buildings, and understand the trends within a year, not year-end results, the trends within a year. And data on even like short cycles, 6-week cycles for kids who are in intervention. That's actually what we need to be able to achieve the kind of gains that you were talking about from, for example, summer programs and high dosage tutoring. You need to know that you've gotten it. And then next year, all of our schools will have access to a single integrated data dashboard. It will have STAR, it'll have OSAS, grades, attendance, interventions. Everything will be tracked through one place. And it'll allow you to go in and say, I need to build a intervention for students with low attendance and who are struggling with this foundational skill. And it'll give you the list of names of those kids. And it'll suggest interventions that are curriculum aligned. These are the kinds of moves that need to be made at a systemic level. And this is why there is nothing in this entire conversation that is an allegation of blame or suspicion or past harm. It's a story of how we make progress together. And then just to complete the loop on my other postscript on behavior, I know that we have more work to do here, but I hope that for those of you who raised your hands, the most important people to me in this audience, that even though we still have behavior challenges, that you've seen the progress that we've made in 2 years, which is millions of dollars of investments in improved systems, rapid response teams, dramatically expanded placements for students with acute needs who need more than you can offer them in a single traditional classroom setting. And as we start to hit a virtuous cycle with behavior, it will make it easier to undertake this incredibly difficult and important work. And then I think as I close, I just want to say, and we have some principals in the room, I saw Ro, I saw a few others, they will say that every time I talk to them, I say the same question. How are teachers feeling about the upcoming adoption? And here's what almost all of them say all the time. Really excited. There is nothing more important to this moment in Salem Kaiser than your excitement about what's coming. I wouldn't trade that for any amount of money or any free resources, because it's about your belief that you and we all can do even better when we just get access to the tools and the support that we need. And with that, I think I'll hand it back to Les.
Thank you. So let's get to the boots on the ground. Let's hear from a teacher. Jessica DeFrancisco is a 3rd grade teacher at Sumter Elementary School. She's been an educator since 2009, including 10 years as a classroom teacher, but also 5 years as a mentor to other teachers. The thing about Jessica that caught my attention, being a fan of pies, is that she has an ambition to be a talented baker akin to the greatest British bake-off. Jessica, we'll talk about your baking another time. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Okay. Truth be told, I would rather talk to a bunch of 8-year-olds because that's where my comfort level is. So I'm excited to be here tonight. I have a couple of my families and kiddos in the audience too. And so I always tell them we can do hard things. So here I am embracing the hard things of getting to talk to you about what I do love. And thank you for highlighting that, which is being a teacher in a classroom, as well as you mentioned, having gotten to coach and do a lot of other great roles within our district too. So I currently do teach third grade, which is a wonderful, pivotal year at Sumter Elementary. So go Stingrays out there. I currently serve as an elementary board director for our licensed union, Salem Kaiser Education Association. But actually, my most proud thing that I'm sitting here before you is I am a parent of a student who's currently in this right now. He is a second grader at our school. So my hope tonight is to be able to have you walk away with just a true testimony to what you've heard a lot of data and research to show us, that it takes a village to be able to do this work. And I want to be able, I'm usually really loud, so I didn't want to yell too much. I want to be able to share with you what it's like to be the face of every single day, getting that responsibility to teach our kiddos how to read. And we touched on it a little bit as far as how our state has reacted and where we've come. And as I sat and processed this, I had to kind of reflect back on my own experience as an educator. And learning to teach reading, I think, is just as hard as trying to learn to read at the same time. And a lot of that was mentioned where undergraduate programs often don't spend a lot of time on our new teachers, teaching them the how and the why reading is so important, but instead focusing more on the what do we do? How do we put the worksheets in front of them? And so I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how that actual start from the preparation from the teacher side really does affect what the success looks like when we move into the classroom as well. I also thought about how we currently have shifted in the time that I've been teaching, which has been quite some time now, away from some of that reading for the joy of just reading too. So when I think about a town hall, I think about all of you that are there who are educators, who are family members, grandparents, and trying to think about where do you fit into this puzzle when we talk about literacy. And a lot of that is being able to understand that reading is something that we want to spark joy and love in for our kids. And currently, we have shifted away from having kids enjoy reading and having it be more of an academic chore, for lack of better words, because everything gets assessed. And I'm not here to say anything wrong against data. I love great data. I love being able to analyze it and pinpoint, but being sure that we're focusing also on giving our kids that true enjoyment of picking up a book. And it could be a cookbook, a graphic novel. There are some great ones out there. But making sure that we're putting books in kids' hands and giving them a chance to actually just sit and read in it. By giving kids that chance to be able to sit and read, we give them an opportunity to be creative, to have fun, to kind of imagine what that world looks like inside their head. And I've done a lot of research, read a lot of books too, and there's a lot of conversations around how, well, a lot of times kiddos have a screen or a tablet in their hand before they have a pencil in their hand. And one of the takeaways from our 3-day training is just how tied our handwriting is to our literacy, and oracy is tied to our literacy. So I'm not here to tell you tech is bad. In the right place, it absolutely can be a powerful tool, especially when we think about our multilingual learners accessing different language skills, how our youngest readers can get an audiobook on it. Those are all great things that have a great place when done intentionally for kiddos. But we shifted away from this idea of kiddos sitting and reading and being able to just sit and reading. And that looked like when, back in the day, how old I am, where it was called DEAR, which was drop everything and read. And literally we would drop everything and read, teachers included. And that we would just sit and enjoy a variety of different books that our teacher would have available to us. We would sample different books. And that protected time gave readers like me, who was a reluctant reader in the beginning, the chance to kind of ask questions, dive into great texts. And we've shifted more into this every minute does count, because we know how important every single moment in school can be for a kiddo. But we've shifted into more direct instruction, more assessment. And so we've got to find a balance again. We've got to figure out how do we get kids to love reading, but yet still honor that reading is something that they should enjoy doing for more than just the essay that they have to be able to write. So shifting away from where, from the educator perspective, I would see us coming from. What are we doing about it? What is Salem Kaiser specifically doing? And as mentioned, I've been here for a while, so I've seen a few things, experienced a few things. And in a nutshell, it got mentioned, this idea of balanced literacy versus whole language literacy. So whole language literacy used to be, and this is what I got taught as an undergrad, we're just going to put books in front of kids. They're just going to osmosis pick it up, right? They're going to be able to open books and figure out words. And we had these cute little posters that we would put up that would say, okay, get your eagle eye on, put your little snake finger on. And then we would hope that kids would be able to decode words because they were making good guesses, they were using the pictures for clues. And that sounds great for about 40% of our kids. About 40% of our kids will do fine with literacy like that, where they'll sit and they'll enjoy books and they'll be successful and fluent readers. However, the other 60% of our kids were looking at a book like Brave Irene and going, well, it's got some cool pictures in it. I've been in the snow before. And not able really to access that education. And so enter into what we are doing now, which is a huge significant change for our kids. We are training our teachers on why reading matters, but more importantly, how reading works. And I like a good acronym and a good kind of story along thing. So I was thinking about this as like, we're the GPS now. We have a route for our kids to follow that previously we were just hoping they would stop along the way and learn some skills along the way. But now we're like, hey, turn left here, you're going to learn about long vowels on this side. So we now have this science of reading that's grounded and supported in the curriculum that was mentioned, that teachers are getting some intentional training around, which is really, really exciting. And I wanted to take a moment to kind of share a story about one of my kiddos. And I will try not to get emotional because kids just, oh, here I am already. Sorry. So I was lucky enough to loop with about a third of my class as second graders into my current third grade classroom. And I had a kiddo who, she is a wonderful reader. She just knew it was something she had to work really, really hard at. And so from the moment that I met her, we started diving into that science of reading using a curriculum from our district called ECRI, which I believe is called, correct me if I'm wrong, Enhanced Core Reading Instruction, is I think what it stands for. And in a nutshell, for those who are like, I don't know what that means that we do letters and sounds and patterns of how those work together, and we do them every day. It's like 5 to 10 minutes. It is intentional. It's built developmentally for kiddos, and we practice it orally. We put it into writing, and I could just put it under the dot cam. But I have a few of my kids here who will tell you we make it into a game show. We talk into a microphone. We have silly voices. We make cheers and chants. And it's something that this kiddo accessed every single day. So every day she's doing this thing with me. And then all of a sudden she's like, hey, the spelling words on the wall have these same patterns in them. And she's starting to see this key and this lock and how they're fitting together and this route that we're building for her. Then bring forward, she's now in third grade with me. On Tuesdays, we do creative writing, and they get to use fancy pens, which is always really fun. And I start to see some of these words and these sound patterns show up inside her writing. And already my teacher heart's like, oh yeah, it's happening, right? This is exciting. And then just a few weeks ago, she came up to me and she brings a book to me that is a larger book than I've ever seen her pick up. And she goes, oh my gosh, Mrs. D, I just read this entire page and it makes sense. And literally in that moment, I was like, yes, the key fits, the path is there. She made the stops with me. And it wouldn't have been possible without a curriculum, but also just thinking about how we have shifted our thinking and how kids learn, and teachers are learning how that works so that we can be able to be systematic and intentional with every single moment that we have with our kids. She's the 60%. She needs the direct instruction. She needs to be at school. She needs to see it many different ways. She needs to play with the language and then practice it with her friends and then know that it's okay to take risks. And I tell you that because reading is a well-rounded educational experience. And sometimes when we think about reading, I'm not talking about just sitting down and reading a book. Reading in our classrooms looks like engaging in a science text as well. Our newly adopted elementary science program has a lot of opportunity for our kids to not only learn incredible things about science. We have a guest teacher that comes in named Dr. D that teaches in a science lab coat for us. And we are doing all kinds of things. Today we were analyzing Ice Age animals, and we're reading texts and we're comparing traits and how they survived. And all of that is literacy based, and it's based in this idea that we've given them this pathway up to this point. So when we think about reading as a community member, it's not just reading and writing like you might traditionally think. We're talking about it in science. We're seeing it in math. We're having that oracy practice, and all of that builds the foundational skills, and it starts in our kinder years. And then we get to build on it every single year. And I love to think about this idea at third grade. I'm that pivotal year where, you know, they're still little, but they do want to do grown-up kind of, you know, older kid things, but it's still really fun to be in class. And now we're not learning just how to read, but now we're actually applying it and we're reading to learn some new things. And that's really a fun place to be. So Salem Kaiser has done a few very intentional shifts. We have made sure that we prioritize foundational skills, as mentioned by our superintendent. She has shared with you that we are focusing in for our youngest kiddos, K2, making sure that foundational skills are prioritized and they're in our master schedule. And just like anything important, if it's not on the schedule, it doesn't happen, right? So even at third grade, it happens every single day. And that 10 to 15 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the day, if you've had an assembly and all the things, we make sure that we practice those skills. And having it be on our schedule not only gives us a curriculum that supports it, but also gives us the time to do it too. We always center our work around our students. They are the #1 reason that we're sitting here today, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I appreciate that there's been a mention that right outside of the importance of our kiddos are our teachers. So all of my colleagues who are out here today, that we have to support our teachers to be able to also do this hard work. And it is hard work on some days. So through the work of our licensed education union, we've been able to help get some protected prep time to do the things that were mentioned. Because I'll be very honest, when I sit and I go ahead and I'm ready to teach a science lesson, I've already thought through what questions my kids are gonna have, what pictures I need to support my multilingual learners, what's the oracy sentence frame that's gonna help them get to the heart of what I'm trying to have them do. And I have done all of that thinking in my head before I even stand up there and teach. And that takes time. It takes time for our teachers to prepare well. It takes time for our teachers to prep the things needed for these lessons. And I appreciate the validation of which comes with that time has to come from somewhere. And having that time in a limited already number of days in our school year feels stressful as a teacher. But I also know that the time I spend preparing is just gonna be better for my kids. It's just gonna be able to have that key, that unlocking, that kiddo that I mentioned before who gets to have that same aha moment, but not just with me, but with any one of my awesome colleagues that I teach with. So we need to make sure that we're balancing that idea of direct instruction and curriculum around that art of teaching, of what makes learning fun. If I just put an ECRI book up there or a text of any kind and we just read it as is, we've all had a teacher that might have used that strategy. It doesn't work for all kids. 60% of the kids need something different, but they need to still have it systematically. And that's where we think about students at the center all the time, but thinking about how teachers help support them in that way too. So I would like to end with, I do truly believe that every single one of our students will be a reader, and they can be a reader, absolutely. I think that we have to be aware that in our modern classrooms, this is a job that we adapt and are different every single year. Every student class that comes to me is a bit different and needs something different from me. So I believe that with time, preparation, the right tools in the right place, that we can make sure that we're giving our kids what they need. And I would like to just kind of impart a bit of sense of urgency, that if you have a reluctant reader that you know, as a grandparent, as a community member, as a teacher, pouring into them right now that just very definite, you are a reader. And then showing them all the different ways that we talked about, that literacy can show up in our lives. And so just making sure that we are always sending the message of, maybe not yet, you can't read that big, huge book that you would like to read from the library, right? That always ends up coming home in the backpack anyway. But hey, we can still read this part because we have those skills. And I do believe that every kiddo will be able to read when we're able to do that.
So just a reminder, if you have questions that have come up, raise your hand. We'll get you a card or get your questions picked up. But now it's really time for you to pay attention, because I've asked our experts here to now turn to how you can help, because this is not just on them. This is on all of us in the community. And so we're going to just go back through the order and have Dana and Andrea and Jessica give you what I hope are ideas that you can take home and implement to help with this issue. Dana?
I just have a few conversation. That is the opportunity to build knowledge about the world around you. That's an opportunity to build vocabulary and engage in discourse, engage in conversation. And we all have that friend, and maybe sometimes we're that friend who's like barely paying attention to you. They're texting, right? That's not being present. And as adults in the lives of our children, we have the opportunity and responsibility to model that for our children. I'm not saying no devices. I read a lot on my Kindle, but just sort of really teaching our children that self-regulation. That is one of our responsibilities as grown-ups in our kids' lives. Again, emphasizing talk and building vocabulary. Our children have so much to say. They are so observant around the world around them, and giving them time and space for authentic exchanges of conversation, starting at the very youngest age, is so vital for building their vocabulary, their schema about the world around them, so that when they get into more complex texts, they have that understanding and that curiosity. I strongly encourage reading at home. That can be reading with a child, to a child, near a child. One of my fondest memories of growing up is going to the library with my dad on Saturdays, just creating that culture where reading is part of your everyday experience. That could be, if you're a more technically minded person, reading a technical manual or reading a cookbook, as Les mentioned before. Like, that functional reading is so vital, but really seeing the value of reading and unlocking those doors for our children. And the final one is attendance. If our children are not in school, they can't benefit from brilliant educators like Jessica. And getting to school on time. When I was a principal, I was always trying to emphasize for families. It's like when you come to a movie a little late, right? You're always like, did I miss something? Like, what am I missing? Who is that character? Maybe they introduced that character at the beginning. That's how our children feel when they come to school late. Like, they feel like they're missing something. So as grown-ups in our kids' lives, getting them to school on time every day is so, so vital. And that's a way that we can really support our children in their development.
Yes to all of those things. I imagine that's going to be common on the table. Well, just briefly on the, read to your kids. I was at Calapooya yesterday, and kindergartners were working on a writing project, and there was a sentence frame that started it, and it was, love is. And so they were sitting on the carpet, and they were talking with each other about what love is. And I was sitting next to a kid, and he turned to me and he said, "Love is when my mom reads to me in bed until I fall asleep." It is powerful time for a lot of reasons, including but not limited to its literacy value. I have one additional one to add to everyone in the room to a certain degree, but mostly to people who will be watching online or watch this later. There is a narrative that 3 out of 4 Salem Kaiser kids can't read. Not true. Not true. And the narrative out there, which is so deficit focused, it is so focused on what isn't happening. We all have a chance to correct that narrative, because it's like a community version of what you were talking about. We have students who can't read yet. And we have students who can't read proficiently yet. But we have an entire school system full of kids who are going to be readers. And I think it just takes all of us to remind people in the community that, yes, this work is important, but I will always resist the narrative of a crisis. Not that that created an awkward moment. Because we have everything we need.
I have mine.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I'd be happy to share if you need. I'll just hold it. I'm not sure how to sit because I'm like sitting against the table right here, but yes, and right. And actually, as I was thinking, okay, if I got to sit across from everybody, and I think about this when I do conferences, what would I want to be able to ask that is manageable for busy lives? Because as a working mom and a family that's very busy, I understand that time is crucial and limited once we get kiddos home. And those moments where we are sitting and reading with our kids are valuable for many, many reasons. But I would urge everybody in here and watching to adopt this yes and mentality as we think through how we can support our youngest learners. Yes, school is going to teach your kiddo the skills and give them practice in the reading. And we can model reading at home. We can make reading be a habit. Just like brushing our teeth, which we hope we do more than once a day, we make sure that this becomes a habit of just what we do as a family that we can help with our student at home. Because as much as I'd like to say that in the short time that I get to be with every single one of my kiddos, that I will get to give them every single piece of thing that they're gonna need, I can't, and I won't. And that's not a failure on my part, that's just the reality of time restraints. And some of them I would happily keep for a lot longer too for us, but I wanted to make sure that we know when I send them home, that I'm sending them home with that habit and that routine already built in place. So my example would be habit stacking. In our household, we are making lunches at the same time that my kiddo is practicing spelling with me too. So we're being able to help support what he needs from school, but yet I still gotta make lunch for the next day too. So finding that way that we can support school and home. As mentioned before, read to kiddos, have them read to you, make silly voices, read a book, and then watch the movie. It's really fun to be able to compare and then talk about the differences between those two. Look for small ways, like 5 to 10 minutes, that we can be able to build in that home habit. And that could be spelling lists, or the thing that's on my brain right now, is writing them down on sticky notes and then hiding them around the house and make it a scavenger hunt. Or if you've got a really young learner who's learning letters and sounds, you put, sticky notes are also apparently a thing in my house too, we put sticky notes all over the place, and then it becomes, what sound does, or letter makes an A sound? And then we go and find that letter, and then we just pull them off the wall. So little tiny ways that we can be able to take what our kiddo is doing at home and being able to implement it systematically again at home as well. Sometimes it's just as simple as having your kiddo write the grocery list of the things that maybe they want from the grocery store too, to help them get some practice in that writing. Or at the dinner table, instead of asking that question of, how was school today? And then getting that look that sometimes parents we get, we ask more open-ended questions like, what are you proud of today? Or what is something that challenged you today? And then inviting them to tell us more about that as well. And just giving them the room to be able to sit back and go, you know, I'm gonna share something that maybe they're gonna be unexpected or not have expected me to say. And it's in those moments where kids practice those skills. And you might thinking like, sitting around at dinner table, how does that promote literacy? Because it's that oracy piece. They're still reflecting. They're connecting school and home and seeing how important that bridge is. And then also connect with your classroom teacher. There's a lot of great small things that we do in class that we're so excited to share with you. And my anecdote around that is that there's simple games. I have a great game called Splat in my classroom. I'm not paid to talk about them or anything, not yet. But it's just a simple card game that we play. And there's just sight words, and we lay them out, and we're like, okay, find the word that begins with the same sound as top. What's the sound? T. And then it becomes a huge, just fun game. So just small, fun, actionable ways. It doesn't have to be sitting and reading a book or writing all your spelling words 5 times each, but how we can be able to kind of make it more innovative and fun for them. And then I will end just with the emphasis again that learning to read is not just our students' responsibility, but it's our shared responsibility, both as parents and caregivers, community members, and that idea of yes and is really important to me because I think about how we build that together. And I loved that you used the word ecosystem earlier because that's a science word that I just really loved and I wrote down too. And we just need to intentionally build this ecosystem around learning that supports all of our learners and then letting them see that that happens at school and at home.
Jessica said I could invite you all to her house after the event so we could all play the sticky note game. All right, now we're going to turn to questions that have come to us from Salem Reporter readers, from you all tonight, and from our own staff. So Rachel Alexander, our managing editor, and Abby McDonald, our senior reporter, will have been going through the questions, and they'll pose the ones to the panel that will elicit the most information on target tonight that will be helpful to you. So let's go ahead.
All right. First question is, how will the community know that the changes in the curriculum are working, and is there a timeline for when we can expect to see results?
So one of the things that we were able to share as a school district is that last school year, for the first time since the pandemic, our teachers reversed a pattern of loss into a pattern of gain. And I want to say that in addition to being so grateful and proud about that because it was about proficiency, the thing that actually mattered to me more than that was that we also reduced substantially the number of students that were at the lowest reading level. And that means that our staff are working across all of these skill levels and systematically moving kids forward. And this is something that, I'll be honest with you, I have taken quite a lot of heat over. I am not a person that believes in setting unrealistic goals to satisfy an expectation that others want to have of us, but we know we cannot deliver on. I would like us to have reasonable and ambitious goals that if we all reach for together, we can achieve, and they will reflect meaningful growth for our kids. So next year, we implement a new curriculum for the first time, and the truth about new curriculum implementation is that not only does it not produce big gains, it actually sometimes causes either a plateau or in some cases a dip, because it's all new materials. Everything that Jessica talked about, knowing the frame, knowing the questions they're going to ask, all of those pieces of readiness have to be started over, even by the most skilled staff. And so while I am not predicting a dip next year, I'm saying we have to believe in the process and the hard work that our staff are going to do, and know that it's going to yield sustainable growth over time. I know we all want magical thinking right now because we all want this problem to be solved. But there is great urgency at the level of every individual student. Every child in your classroom, you are feeling intense urgency around. And across our whole system, we have to know that we are starting a process. In Mississippi, which you will read about everywhere if you take a moment to, the state superintendent of Mississippi has recently become somewhat crabby about this thing called the Mississippi Miracle. And now every time she hears it, well, every time she did hear it, she has changed jobs. She says it wasn't a miracle, it was a marathon. And they started in 2013. They didn't start yesterday. It will take us time and we will get there. And it requires us to have faith in the incredible work going on in our schools.
I can, feel free, go ahead. Deserving. I was like, from my perspective, the very real, tangible way and how is that sorry, I'm used to being so loud, thank you. That talk to your child's teacher. There will be really sophisticated reporting that we get to use, that we progress monitor as mentioned before. And so there will be actionable data that will come out of this, even with a new adoption, that we can still be able to see whether our students are succeeding with what we currently are doing.
In our recent professional development, we learned that first grade reading determines a student's success. Knowing this, why are we moving students forward who have not mastered needed skills in kindergarten and first grade?
Well, this is going to be one of those questions I'll only be able to answer partially, but I also think Jessica's going to have great insight on, and then you'll have a research perspective. There is really mixed evidence about retention. And while it does, I mean, when I was growing up, I remember very much retention happened quite frequently. We would often have kids who were with us one year and not with us the next. But the counter story there is that retaining kids also can have an extremely damaging impact on their sense of themselves as learners, on their confidence that they can reach the kind of comfort and joy in reading and other academic skills that you talked about. And most troubling to me, there is a lot of evidence that retaining kids in early grades is a very strong predictor of their eventual dropout. So it is not a simple matter of just deciding that we're going to create this hard stop between grades and fiercely defend it for the kids' own good. It is also a matter of recognizing that it is a blend of opportunity and harm. And I do believe that the better method is to figure out how to get interventions in place that allow students to move forward rapidly and catch up, not change their fundamental identity and sense of self as a learner.
Yeah,
and I totally agree with everything that you said, Andrea, and the research is very mixed on it, and there are some really detrimental impacts on children and their identity and their sense of self, which we know is a really important piece of what we're developing, along with those explicit skills to decode and understand text. A couple other thoughts. High dosage tutoring is a really powerful lever to layer in to a child's experience that can help really bridge gaps for children who have unfinished learning or need to accelerate. Same thing with summer learning. And I want to point out that Andrea mentioned the word of acceleration. It's a really different philosophy from intervention. So intervention is all the things you don't have. Acceleration is thinking about what are the key pieces you need to get to grade level. And so a combination of both a solid grade level learning opportunity, which with a strong curriculum, all children will have access to, coupled with powerful acceleration opportunities, can really close the gap for our children. And then along the way, we're going to see fewer and fewer children needing those levels of support. Thinking of those kindergartners who have access right now to the adoption materials you're piloting, but certainly to the children next year, we're going to see those changes over time. It's small, but statewide, and Andrea mentioned the scores in Salem-Kaiser, statewide last year, our third graders had a boost in their performance on our OSAS, our state test. It was the first year in a very long time. Our post-pandemic recovery has been slower than the rest of the country, and that's a promising first signal of that progress.
I have nothing new to add.
It's not a test.
Okay, perfect.
I'm going to combine two audience questions here. So would you say that the reading crisis is as prevalent in high schools and middle schools as it is in elementary schools? And then what is being done to get them caught up?
Yes, it is. I read something recently. I have my husband's uncle, is he my uncle-in-law? He's on the faculty at U of O, and we talk about how his students don't read books. And there was something that came out recently in the 74 about high school students not reading books, college students not reading books. And there were strong impacts of the pandemic, of online learning, that impacted all of us and all of our children. In addition to some of the pieces of reading instruction that we're addressing now, our children carry forward with them. In many places, there's schools and middle schools and high schools are thinking about ways to provide those scaffolds, those opportunities using high dosage tutoring and other practices to bridge those gaps while children continue on with that grade level access and learning. And in Oregon, we have a new adolescent literacy framework that our State Department of Education put out, which also provides guidance and supports and resources for school districts, in addition to some new federal funding from the CLSD, Comprehensive Literacy State, Development, which many districts, you guys got that, yes? Many districts across our state have those resources to support K-12 literacy in a really comprehensive and coherent way, and so our state is working on that as well.
Questions, and as we've historically done with these, I will be saving them and using them for future reporting and maybe a Q&A thing next week, especially for some of the ones from SKSD staff that are a little more technical and in the weeds, so don't fear if we don't get to you. Literacy research and cognitive science tells us that social studies and science should be critical levers for boosting literacy, especially at elementary. Given the wealth of research supporting how important these content areas are, will Salem-Kaiser be providing teachers with more time and resources to teach these subjects?
I think we all agree that being able to, one, learn a sense of joy and curiosity across all the content areas is incredibly important. It's not just the joy of reading, it's also the joy of discovery, and anyone who's ever spent time with a child who's first learned about dinosaurs knows exactly what that looks like. And also, this matter of time is the central issue. People think that the key limiting function in school districts is money, but I would argue it's actually time. And our staff are working so much that even more money doesn't solve the problem of more time. So we are just constantly continuing to work on that balance. And one of the areas that we're working on it the most is trying to figure out how to make sure that as our staff are trying to onboard all of these new curriculums, so this is especially true at elementary, where you're not just going to be doing the reading curriculum next year. Right. You are the teacher who's doing all of it, that they're getting space to plan, which is what we're always working on together with labor, but also the ability to figure out how to transition some of the key things that they're learning in and learning for their reading curriculum and teaching their students into the other areas too. That crossover, the ability to do exactly what you were describing, which is taking some of the key elements of, say, foundational skills and applying them to the settings in which kids are learning science. Those are going to be the ways that this task, which is quite magnificently complex, can make its way to being manageable.
I'll add a little bit onto that. As somebody who got to pilot the new adopted this year science curriculum the year prior, it really is the marathon. And being very intentional does take time, and being cognizant as a teacher and how it can cross over between the two is how we're able to integrate in. It doesn't fit beautifully, I'll be very honest, and it takes a lot of time and work. But when it is done well, it is very powerful. When we're seeing those reading skills of cause and effect show up in our literacy block, but also that I get to talk about it during a social studies block too. It is a part of that. Teachers need time. We need to have that mindset of it's going to be able to eventually be successful for our kiddos, but it always feels like they're in separation right now. And I think that takes time to have teachers talk to each other, to have planning around it, so that we can make sure that it doesn't feel like we're teaching science in a vacuum and then reading in a vacuum. So it is a very true thing.
So, with so many children utilizing before and after school programs like Champions, SCDC, and the Y, how can they support literacy and align our curriculum to focus on the same work?
Well, I'm going to use this opportunity to expand slightly and say that our community partners are core partners in this mission because, yes, it's an ecosystem. And also, Salem Kaiser is special in the sense that we are a very tight community with lots of connections to schools. Just today I was at a table which was most of Salem and Kaiser's most important youth providers, and they were all sharing their plans and also their questions about how they can support literacy and attendance. If we were a community that all decided that those were the two things, our trajectory would be fundamentally transformed in 5 years. And so, I think part of the answer to that question is that we as a school district want to be a resource to our community partners in helping them understand what quality literacy materials look like and connecting our community-based providers to the kind of training that will make their work as effective as they want it to be. Because yes, reading to kids, that's great. Providing them books, that's great. But there are actually fairly quick to teach skills that we can provide our after school program partners that will dramatically advance some of our kids' basic skills, and we want to be able to partner in that. And then I will also use this just as a moment to offer a quick plug, because one of the most cost-effective things that our community can do with a community partner is participate in Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. It is by far the cheapest way that we can get high quality English and Spanish text into the hands of kids. The cost per book is, I don't remember, but I believe it is, less than a couple of dollars, and kids will get one every month. And this is one of the many ways that our community partners are making literacy happen, but our community members can make the partners successful.
Andrea, number one, the Dolly Parton thing. Can you explain a little more? How does someone sitting there help with that? Is there a monthly contribution? Is there a program? How do they get engaged?
Yes, well, first you get to have some relationship to Dolly Parton, so that's just an added benefit. And I think there's materials out front, but the bottom line is that a community partner here in town, the Hub, is actually the key regional distributor for Dolly Parton Imagination Library books. You can make direct donations to them. It's something my family does because I know how easy it is, how cost effective it is, and how much it matters to families. But materials are in the lobby.
This is coming from a certified dyslexia tutor. The students I have from Salem Kaiser are illiterate. They can't read, spell, or write in 3rd to 5th grade. All are in Learning Resource Center. 1 in 5 people is dyslexic, not based on sex, race, or economics. What is the district going to do to address students with dyslexia? Parents reading to their children something I love will not translate to understanding how to decode and encode.
You know, we were hearing earlier about the 60-40 split, and inside of the 60 is another very important slice of students that have dyslexia or other related issues, and just the core strategies of accessing print text are much more difficult and require special strategies. I think that the most important thing that we're moving forward right now is just a systematic use of a much more effective screener. And it's effective in both Spanish and English. And early screening, quality diagnostic work early on is a large portion of this challenge. I don't know that 1 in 5 sounds quite right to me, but I do know that for the percentage of students who have dyslexia, we need to know early, and we need to be able to offer the kind of specific interventions and skill building activities that actually help them crack the code in the way that they need to.
Yeah, I'd also add on the explicit instructional approach that Jess was describing with ECRI, making sure that every child starting in kindergarten has explicit foundational skills instruction aligned to a clearly research-informed scope and sequence that tackles all of the different components of Scarborough's rope is foundational to, and children who experience dyslexia, many of them with that strong start, will be able to crack the code in layering on additional interventions and supports as needed.
How will the district systematically address chronic absences across the district?
Well, I'm going to go back to the ecosystem comment for a second. We are systematically intervening, and we need the intervention to be coming in from all sides. I am very close to saying that schools are doing everything we can. And when I say that, I mean you could enter any elementary school in Salem Kaiser right now, and you will find visual charts of attendance. You will find incentive programs. You will find school office staff who are the personal ambassadors of attendance success. You will find attendance trackers taped inside of kids' cubbies. You will find pizza parties. You will find squishies. You will find celebrations. I believe that we as a school district are doing a lot of good work on attendance, but in elementary school in particular, it is parents, it is the adults in the family that are more likely to be making the decision about whether kids come to school, and that makes it a community issue. We are not going to blame families who aren't doing it. We are going to find the tools and conditions and resources to remind them how important it is every day, on time. Because it is hard to enter late, and you feel like you are already off balance because of whatever happened in your morning, and then you come late and you're even more off balance. We need to be the community that says every day on time is possible. And I will speak briefly from our board chair's perspective. Many of you know Cynthia Richardson. I'm not saying we should all do this. Cynthia has a special gift for it, but every time she sees a school-aged child not in school, do you know what she says? She says, "Where do you go to school? And why aren't you there today?" We need our corner stores, when they see school-age kids, to say, "I think you should be in school." We need our parents to say, "I know you don't feel like it, but you need to go to school today." We need to thank our educators for everything they're doing to try to make that happen, but this has to be a community effort.
Jessica, would you expand a little bit on that? I mean, as a classroom teacher, what is the impact of those absences?
It's a day lost of learning. And just as mentioned before, that kiddo has to come when they come back, and it's a celebration when they're back in our room. We then have to be able to, as a classroom teacher, pivot and provide what that student missed to the best of our ability. And it's very challenging to do, especially if it's repeated absentee or repeated tardiness as well. And I just want to take a moment to just recognize that, especially in elementary school, it is easy to look at a kiddo and direct that question at them, but yet, as mentioned, it is not their fault. And so how we frame that to kiddos and how we support them to help support their grown-up to get them to school is very important, because a lot of things are happening. We're buying alarm clocks for kids so that they can help to build some independence to help their grown-up get them to school. But the loss and the fragmentation that happens for a kiddo who is chronically absent or tardy, they start to feel that inferiority happen in class, where they see other things happening without them, and it's very challenging as a community.
Is such a foundational issue, right? I'd like to hear from each of you. How do we create a community ethic of school attendance, where it is a community-wide expectation, not an option? You've all worked in different states and different districts. Do you have any miracles or marathon solutions?
I certainly don't have any miracles, but a couple of practices. It's grounded in relationship and in community. Having in my principalship in the 2 different schools which I had the privilege to be principal, there were families who had had really negative experiences with school and did not feel welcome, did not feel invited into the school, and that feeling that they experienced, whether it was from their own schooling experience or maybe something one of my staff did, at times I might have done things unintentionally causing harm to families. And so it's really getting to the root cause of relationship and really offering strong customer service to our families when they come into our buildings. That doesn't mean we don't honor the safety procedures and to keep our students and faculty safe, but really creating a welcoming environment for families to want to come to school and feel in relationship. I think another key component is making it so instruction is a can't miss opportunity. You know, Andrea, you talked a lot about behavior. When our children are engaged in learning, most of them are going to light on fire and be so excited to participate in the learning. And children can put that positive pressure on their families. Like, I don't want to be late. It's my day to share in morning meeting. I don't want to be late because I know we're reading the next chapter of the book tomorrow. And so it's that opportunity to really think about every moment counting and creating that environment. I also, might be a little controversial, but our teachers' attendance also influences our children's attendance. I've heard from children firsthand, well, if my teacher's not there, like I'm not gonna really do anything that productive. And we have really excellent guest teachers and substitute teachers in our school. Of course, people get sick and have other needs, but that does also influence the culture within a school community.
You know, I think from a state perspective, there are things that we can do as a state that can help change this, but it does require us all, not just in our community, but more broadly, to say, yeah, this is worth the time and effort. So, for example, in my time in Rhode Island, one of the things that we were able to do is, well, first, honestly, it started by deciding that we'd partner with a number of state agencies, and the moment a child was born, they were issued a student ID. And that meant that every student in the state was part of a system of data sharing. And that meant that we had partnerships with pediatricians and primary care providers. And when you went in for your well baby visit, they started talking with you then about how important reading is, early milestones of development. As you continued to go in, you were talking with them about whether or not you were going to school. It was part of a wellness dialogue, not just a conversation that was happening at the pickup line or in classrooms or over Parent Square. Those are part of the things that a state can do, but it requires a whole state to decide that this is a priority, and the solution isn't merely just pointing at school districts and telling us that we should be smarter, better, faster, more comprehensive, but rather that we have to share this, because this happened to us largely over COVID, which means it's reversible. We chose to do it, so we can choose to undo it. We just need to decide that that's the kind of prioritization that we want to place on the attendance issue.
Yes, and. I was just jotting down notes because we're thinking about how school is a customer service business. I don't like using that word because it doesn't feel like a business when I'm in front of all my kids. However, I think it's important to recognize that we do have families that have had negative experiences at school. And as a culture in our buildings, we also need to find ways to invite those families in that are not just to sit and talk about the data that their kid has for reading and writing and math. We need to be able to be creative and innovative in how we have community events that invite families who maybe language is the barrier and there is a cultural reason or understanding that me as the classroom teacher can be able to know about that family and why that absentee is happening. But by only seeing my families when I'm talking to them about the strengths and weaknesses of their kiddos, I'm right there building a small wall between me and the success of that kiddo. And so I think one of the things we could do, and many of our schools are very successful in this already, is regular events that kind of bring down that go, hey, come on in a costume and come get some candy while you play a math game, right? It's very low stakes, and it helps our families start to see the school as that welcoming connectedness, and versus I send them there, they come home, hopefully we hear some things about it. So.
Question.
There are notable discrepancies between students from low-income households and more affluent students. How is the district working to give extra support to those who need it?
Yeah, there are quite noticeable discrepancies. And I think that part of the story you're hearing across the whole table is that this is a multidimensional answer. And one of the dimensions of it is that we need to, as we move forward by improving both our skill as a system and the quality of the tools that we're using, finding that artful balance where for students who, for whatever reason, they are discrepant, they are below grade level, that we are giving them access to a full 90 minutes of tier 1 core content instruction, because if they have access to grade level learning and grade level content with their peers that is dynamic and engaging and has fun voices and believes in them, then they're stretching up simultaneously, even as they have gaps that they need to fill. And then those get combined with targeted acceleration opportunities that fill in the missing pieces. I think very often I hear from people a belief that what we need to do is do even more pullout and even more intensive intervention. And it's not entirely wrong, but the art of this, the science of it, is in the balance of the two. And the two combined are going to get us there. We too are in the high dosage tutoring program that will start next year. CLSD, the grant you mentioned before, K-12 is what's paying for a lot of our professional development for staff, including the 3 days that we did last week. All of these are the systematic tools that, regardless of the reason, we'll be using to help catch kids up.
It is very apparent, having taught in a diverse amount of elementary schools within Salem Kaiser, where I have had to purchase many of the materials on my own for my kids to do an art project, to being in a building that has wonderful resources that I didn't know were even possible. And so I was thinking, as you were discussing, is this idea around we're finally kind of aligning ourselves that all Salem Kaiser students and all staff, we are all a part of it. So even though I am sitting up here and I'm representing a specific school right now, those kids that are in other buildings do belong to me as well. I care just as deeply about them as I do my own students. And I think one of the ways that we help to level this playing field is by using our resources, as mentioned. And we have scope and sequences so that if a kiddo is moving between buildings and I am a third grade teacher here, that third grade teacher over there is doing the same content with the same ability as I am. And so trying to make sure that I don't want to use the word fidelity, but that is the word that comes to mind, because that kiddo needs me and that new place that they're going possibly, or that building over there, to have the same amount of resources, to have the same amount of access. And that comes from making sure that we're giving all of our staff and all of our students the best available possible all the time.
Well, I told you when we started that I was going to introduce you to 3 people who are deeply experienced and deeply passionate. Was I right? We owe great thanks to Dana, Andrea, and Jessica for taking their time from very busy schedules to be with us tonight to sort of pull back the curtains in ways that I thought were effective and actionable. What's really clear from their presentations is we have a big challenge ahead of us. These people need our help. Our schools need our help. And most important, our kids need our help. So I leave you with a question for yourself to walk out the door tonight. What am I going to do to help? And with that, I bid you a good night.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Salem Reporter's Town Hall on the student reading crisis. We just heard from a panel of 3 experts about some of the reasons that we are where we are right now and how you can help. So our Salem-Keizer Superintendent, Andrea Castaneda, talked about the need to adopt effective curriculum in reading to really kind of standardize and use evidence when we're teaching kids. We also talked about some unique challenges in Oregon, like our really short school year, the fact that we have a high level of local control, which means schools and districts are doing different things. And then our panel also shared a lot of ideas for how you can help getting the kids and students in your life reading.
Yeah, something that stuck with me that they said is just look for ways to make reading fun. Ask your kid to help write the grocery list. Look for ways to find reading in everyday activities that doesn't always look like sitting and reading a book with them. We're going to be doing a recap on our website tomorrow, and you'll get to tune in and read more there.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.